Good evening and welcome to The Journey Home. My name is Marcus Grodi, your host for this program. As we begin in a whole new year, the world did not end. Here we are. We're here by the graces of God, but of course, just because we are here doesn't mean that we've arrived. We're called, of course, to continue recognizing our need for holiness and growth. So we have a whole new year to, as St. Paul said, forgetting what lies behind, I press onward. Oh, that's the new opportunity for us. So welcome to The Journey Home. Another year of introducing to you men and women who, motivated by the work of the Holy Spirit in their hearts and minds and in their lives, find themselves open to the beauty and fullness of the church. And such is the case tonight. Our guest is KENN CRAMER. He's a, for want of a better term, revert to the faith, but during that period away, he was a former agnostic, non-denominational, Episcopalian. Sounds like he covers a lot of ground in there. Ken, it's good to have you here.
No, thank you for having me. It's my honor.
On The Journey Home. And I will say at beginning, just because sometimes I forget it, you have a website, www.saintraphaelcounseling.com, right?
That is
because
true. Correct.
You are a psychotherapist.
Yeah, Catholic psychotherapist. Yeah, in private practice, I own have a business partner named Dr. Jim Langley, and we have some therapists that work for us, and we service the Catholic community in the Denver area, and also do some distance counseling as well through Skype and whatnot. So
yeah, I wanted to bring that up right at the beginning because we'll maybe get into it later. Because if anything, this is one of the biggest needs today. It seems to be a dearth of trustworthy counselors for marriages, for young people, for people dealing with the economic crisis that we're in. How do you move forward? How do you apply your faith to life? And there's far too many theories out there that are based on secular reasoning, secular foundations. And there was a time, if we went back into the 50s and 60s, it seemed like Hollywood was in love with counselors and psychologists. They were always the great heroes of the movies.
Right. But
some of the theories in those movies were bizarre.
Absolutely.
So where do we go today? Well, it's so good to hear that there's a Catholic-based counseling.
Absolutely.
That's great. We need to hear more about them around the country. So.
Yeah, I could, if the show was about that, I could talk about that for hours upon end. And yeah, we certainly try to incorporate kind of basically it's a mixture of secular psychology mixed in with a lot of Ignatian spirituality. So this kind of what sets us apart from secular therapists is that we really obviously believe that people have souls, and that we try to look upon our clients with a certain level of dignity that every Catholic is called to look at human beings with, and just a real recognition that each person has this core to their heart or their soul that is in need of healing from God. So we chose St. Raphael because Raphael literally translates to God heals or God's medicine. And so we just really know that we're not the ones actually doing the healing. It's God who does the healing, and we're just there to help that process along.
Well, what sets you different than me as we sit here is our genetics. There's also the environment in which we were brought up in.
Absolutely.
But there's also that unique character that you were given and I would, right? I mean, that's what we recognize. Secular psychologists ignore that third part.
Absolutely.
We're either genetics or environment that shape everybody. But then there's also that assumption amongst secular psychologists, it seems, to try and group everybody into commonalities, and that can be right or wrong, and bizarre conclusions, ignoring the unique individualism that God gives to each person.
Most definitely. Yeah, our little tagline is a quote from St. Irenaeus, which is, the glory of God is man fully alive. And so we just have a belief that's rooted in our Catholic faith that in order to become fully alive, we need to look deep inside ourselves, and but ultimately we're looking deep inside ourselves. We're becoming fully alive to give glory to God, to draw ourselves closer to Him, and that's really the basis for all the counseling that happens in our center.
So saintraphaelscounseling.com.
Absolutely.
All right. So maybe we won't cover all that on the Journey Home program, obviously, but maybe we'll have a chance to invite you to be in another program with EWTN to cover more directly this growing need as well as the growing solutions that groups like yours are able to provide. So
That'd be wonderful.
all that's set aside until later.
Okay.
Let me invite you to take that big step back and let the audience know where you've come from spiritually.
Sure. Well, I've definitely been on a spiritual journey throughout my life. I grew up in a very kind of, I know I don't look like it, but I grew up in a very stereotypical Italian-American family. Both my grandparents are from Italy, my grandfather from Sicily, and my grandmother from Naples. And grew up in the Chicagoland area. So my family was Catholic. My nuclear family, so my mother, my father, and I have 2 brothers and a sister, kind of grew up in a Catholic environment where I definitely wasn't catechized really at all, except really by my mother, who more so taught me about just the heart of God, the love of God the Father specifically. So I heard a lot about how much God loved me and could help me and take care of me, but wasn't really catechized through anything about the saints or the church specifically. So we would kind of go through long periods of time where we actually wouldn't go to church, I say unfortunately, but I'm not really sure if it's necessarily unfortunate, because after it's all said and done, the concept of redemptive suffering, I really realized that one of the things that makes God so great is being able to take good things out of bad, right? But I grew up in an abusive household. So my father was, we'll just say, not a nice guy. And so I kind of had this contradictory image going on in my young life, that here my mother was telling me that God loved me and wanted the best for me, but on the other end I was experiencing all of this abuse in my home life. And so I think quickly as a young child I kind of saw the contradiction there. Well, if God loved me so much, why would he allow these bad things to happen to me? So I grew not to trust God, not just not to trust God, but not to trust authority, not to trust women, because all of the key examples in my life were kind of letting me down in that area. I came to be about, when I was 14 years old, I was supposed to be confirmed. I was kind of loosely still going to church here and there.
Where were you at personally with God?
Yeah, I was done. I was absolutely done. So when I still believed in a God, that there was some kind of higher power, I just didn't know how to explain it. I didn't know if he, really cared about anything. So judging what I know now, I think I probably would have had kind of a deist kind of interpretation of God, that God created the world, but then kind of took off and left us to our own devices. So I refused to get confirmed. I basically told my parents that I had enough of your brainwashing, and I'm done. They didn't particularly fight back very hard on that, so I was kind of left to my own devices. From the time that I was 14, I left my house when I was 16 years old for the first time. My father and I, on the day of my 16th birthday, got into a really hefty argument about a trivial matter. And I decided that I had had enough of the abuse and enough of the control, and so I left. And I moved in with a friend's family, my friend Zane Meek. And his family was just very wonderful to me. Absolutely loving and kind. Took me into their home, and I stayed my entire senior year of high school with them. During that time, I knew that my mother and my younger siblings, my older brother Rob had left for college. He'd gone to school in Wisconsin. I knew that it had hurt them very deeply, that I had left, but I did what I felt like I had to do in order to survive. It was during that time that I was staying with the Meeks that I started getting involved in using drugs. Kind of just starting out with marijuana and then pretty quickly moving into hallucinogens.
Not because of the family that you were staying with.
Yeah,
but just without that connection of your parental.
Absolutely. It was definitely just all the hurt from not having a home life or a father that a lot of my friends did have. The family that was housing me had a very nice home life. So during this time, and looking back in hindsight, I don't have very many regrets in my life, but the way that I treated the family that took me in the Meeks, I definitely regret because of the drug use that I was doing. I stole from them and just really took for granted the love that they offered me. This kind of culminated in 17, about 6 months away from graduating high school, and I decided that I had had enough of life, and decided that I would end it. And so that kind of driven by a curiosity about God as well too. I know it sounds weird, but not only from the pain and the hurt that I was feeling, but I genuinely wanted to know God. I wanted to figure out this question of like who God was and what really happens to us after we die. One evening,
was it a hope?
Definitely a hope.
That it was better.
Absolutely.
It wasn't just curiosity, it really was.
If my mom is right and there's this God who loves me, undisputably, then it's not going to matter what I do, and I'm going to go off to this better place, and I won't have to deal with any more of this suffering. So that one night I decided that I was going to do it, and everybody was kind of out of the house, and I ended up, to make a long story short, ended up taking a whole bunch of prescription medication from the family that I was staying with. I ended up basically having an overdose, and during that time, as I was laying on my bed, my heart was pounding in and out of my chest. I felt like, a lot of people talk about how God has talked to them, and we hear God kind of in this way. It's not very audibly. During this time, I felt like that I actually heard God speak to me, because once I had started overdosing, I started pleading to this God that I hadn't talked to in a long time, to not let me die, that I had made a mistake, and that I didn't want to die. And this voice said to me simply, "Ken, I'm not going to let you die. After all, what would happen to your mother?" And nothing very theologically profound, but profound in its own way.
Oh yeah.
I woke up the next morning much to my surprise, that I was not dead. And you would think that right then and there I would have this kind of intense conversion experience and be very grateful and towards God for saving my life, but I wasn't. I was thankful to God for saving my life, and so that kind of confirmed to me that there was a God, that there was this force in my life, but I was still far too messed up internally just to give myself to Him at that time. So I graduated high school by the skin of my teeth, and ended up not going directly into college. I was still smart enough to understand that I was, as some people call a hot mess, that if I were to go to school, it would be an absolute waste of money, and it would only, cause me more trouble down the road. So I was smart enough to understand that I was irresponsible enough not to go to school. So I didn't. But I moved to a town in northern Colorado called Greeley, where some friends were going to college. And I moved in with them and just started working. I worked some jobs at like doing overnights at a 7-Eleven. To ended up working at a coffee shop for a long time. And it was during...
I was just going to say, during any of that time, were there any of your friends trying to get you to church? Or were there
Absolutely not.
Anybody at all trying to break through?
My mother.
Okay.
My mother. My mother during the entire time would always... she continues to this day just to love me so much. She was always, telling me to, you can always go back to your roots. Don't forget about God, and I didn't really listen. But my mom was really the only one at that time. All of my friends were non-religious people. Some very, adamantly anti-religious. I had fully submersed myself in a culture that was very anti-God in every kind of aspect. I found myself becoming a little bit more and more rebellious these 4 years before I started college. I started college when I was 22 years old. I joined a lot of kind of semi-political activist movements. I definitely would have considered myself a quasi-socialist, more communist than anything. I really had, this heart for poor people and for people that were suffering, and trying to find ways to heal not only myself but those around me. And I naturally think people that lean that way, that's their kind of a lot of people anyway. Their inward motive is that. They see a lot of hurt and they want to try to do something about it. So I got involved in various kind of political organizations during that time.
Were you fighting against your dad coming out in you?
I think so. In a lot of ways, my father has always been a huge part of my life. In this way specifically, I would say it was kind of this fight against authority. My father being that representation of things that are trying to give you direction, to control you, to have authority over you. And they were not to be trusted. So at that time, that kind of melded into professors were not to be trusted. Certainly clerics were not to be trusted. The government was not to be trusted. All sorts of things. Just that you were really kind of on your own. I had gotten more and more steadily involved with drugs throughout this time. I ended up developing a pretty serious habit of abusing cocaine. And my life started, for the most part, falling apart. When I look back upon it, I hurt a lot of people. I hurt a lot of people in my life. Friends, family, strangers. And as I felt myself kind of falling into this downward spiral of life and started having some really heavy depressions and dealing with those, there were always these brief moments where it was very apparent now that God was really reaching out to me. I remember this time. This was during the day before July 4th, and a bunch of my friends and I had planned this kind of big protest the following day. And the parade ran right in front of our house where we were all staying at. And so people would camp out the night before to make sure they had good spots. And I was out in front of my house hanging out with some of my friends, drinking, drugging. And across the street, there were a group of people who had a guitar and they were singing. And it was very apparent that they were singing worship songs. And other people around the neighborhood and some of my friends would start to yell at them, like telling them to shut up and to knock it off and yelling things. And I got defensive of them. You know, I turned to my friends and said, hey guys, listen, like, it's cool. You know, they're okay. Like, just let them do what they want to do. It's not that big of a deal. And I actually walked over to them, and I was quite intoxicated when I did this. I walked over to them and just said, I want to let you guys know that I appreciate your boldness for standing up for what you believe in. And they immediately asked me to join. You know, they were like, oh, do you want to join us? Do you want to, you know, hang out? And I said, no, it's okay. Like, me and God don't get along, and walked away. It was shortly after that time, I came home one night to my home. My roommate at the time was dealing narcotics. And so my house was always filled with a certain kind of people. And I came home from a night of doing drugs myself, and was just kind of generally annoyed that there was a lot of people in my house. And I went into the bathroom, and I filled up the sink with some water, and I took some water and splashed it on my face. And I looked at myself in the mirror. And when my eyes met my eyes, I felt the same exact feeling that I had felt when I was 17 when I had tried taking my life. A feeling that I've come to kind of associate with the Lord letting me know what it really feels like to be separate from Him. I don't know if I want to go as far as to describe that as hell, but it's certainly a kind of hell for sure. And there really are no words to describe it other than complete separation from God. I mean, lost, darkness, disgusting. I mean, just an intense feeling. And it shocked me. And so I kind of fell backwards and fell onto my backside, and I sat there. And it, again, it's just this moment of private revelation where I felt like the Lord clearly presented me two options. The first option was, Ken, you can continue to do what you're doing with yourself and with your life, and you'll be dead within a year. No doubt. Or you can get yourself up off of this floor, and you can really strive to become the man that I know that you can be. There really is nothing more than that. I chose the latter. I woke up the next morning and I said, I'm going to make something out of myself. I'm going to, in a sense, repent for the things that I have done and make things right. So I immediately put myself into an outpatient rehab facility where I would meet with a counselor a few times a week to help me clean myself up. I applied to school, to college, and I was given a book by a friend named Earl. He gave me a book of Taoist philosophy called the Tao Te Ching. And I read it, and this was really kind of the first spiritual book that I had read in a really long time. And I loved it. I ate it up. There was something inside of me that was saying, this is the path. This is the path that you should look into this. And so I started looking into a lot of Eastern philosophy, and all the while reading all these wonderful things that were really kind of igniting my soul. But at the same time, that voice inside was saying, this is good, but keep going, keep seeking, keep searching. And so I did. I looked into and studied up on all sorts of religious works, various religions, staying completely away from Christianity. I had no intent of going back, kind of knowing that as I grew up that Christianity had nothing to offer me. It had its chance, specifically Catholicism, and that it wasn't for me. I got pretty heavily involved into what would be considered like Buddhism. I went on some Buddhist retreats with Buddhist monks and got very much into meditating. And again, I think I was slowly getting better. At that time in my life, I wasn't completely clean. I would have small relapses. I certainly was not living a chaste life by any means of the imagination. But other things were getting better. I was stable enough that I was in school, and I was able to do well in school. I mean, better than I had ever done before. And during that time, I was working at a restaurant, still one of my favorite jobs of all time, a place called Roma. It was like a college pizza place, so I was one of those guys that spun pizzas and had a lot of fun doing that. And I met a friend there. His name is John, and I was a kitchen manager at that time, and John had applied for a job, and he was a dishwasher. And it's funny, we all jokingly called John a walking oxymoron, because John was about 6'2", 210 pounds in Korean, which is kind of a little bit odd in and of itself. But then on top of that, he was raised and grew up his entire life in Minnesota, so he had this kind of thick Minnesota accent. He's a wonderful man.
He said, "Don't you know?"
Yeah, exactly. Don't you know? How's it going? What about it? John had a group of friends that he had met in his time living in Greeley, or as us people who have spent time in Greeley call it, the Greality. So, he had met these people in Greality, and he became my roommate. And John wasn't what I would consider, like a zealot Christian, but somebody who considered himself Christian. So this was really kind of my first Christian friend. He would, go to church, and that was pretty foreign to me. But he was hanging around with this community of folks who I still hold very dear in my heart. A group of Christians. They were non-denominational Christians. A man by the name of Jeff Cook, I really took a liking to, because Jeff was really into philosophy. At that time, he was studying philosophy at the University of Boulder, and had all these interesting ideas about God, and about religion, about politics. And I was kind of in the midst of taking some philosophy classes that I found really intriguing, and I was specifically intrigued. I took a class on existentialism, and I was specifically intrigued by the works of Soren Kierkegaard. And so I would meet with Jeff and go over to him and his wife Kelly's house. They didn't have children back then. They now have two wonderful boys. And me and Jeff would talk about religion and philosophy and politics, and along the way, besides each and every day, Jeff's arguments were making a little bit more sense to me, and there was something behind it, and that voice inside of me saying, keep going, keep seeking. Something really took me aback, and it was Jeff's community that he had around him. These community of Christians were certainly not perfect people. They definitely had, stereotypical problems that all communities have, a little bit of gossip here and there, and drama, social circle drama to deal with. And so that wasn't abnormal to me. What was abnormal was how they dealt with those problems and how well they treated each other. These people were open and honest with their struggles with one another, and respected people's journeys and people's lives, and really just the only way I can describe it is they really treated each other with love. And that was something, again, very foreign to me. I was used to coming from an environment where people pretty much dealt with their problems by trying to escape them, to get rid of them, which is what I had been doing my entire life. And seeing that, I knew that I wanted that. I wanted that in my own life, that sense of community, that sense of belonging. I wanted love.
Let's pause right there.
Yeah.
I think that's a good place, Kim, because we do need to take a break. But I think, again, here's one of those awakening moments by God in you, holding out before you a different life that you're being drawn to. So that's exciting. Let's come back to that in a second, Ken. We'll see you in a bit. Welcome back to the Journey Home. Our guest tonight is Ken CRAMER, and I've paused you right in the middle of a realization of an expression of Christianity that you're sensing. This is what you want. God is drawing you in that direction.
Absolutely. So knowing that I wanted that, I decided to look into it, a little bit more heavily. I ended up engaging in some kind of, philosophical arguments with my older brother. My older brother was studying for his PhD at the time, and knew a lot about the faith from an intellectual standpoint, and a theological standpoint as well too. So we kind of started having some conversations about Christian theology, and it really dawned on me that shortly after some of our talks that I couldn't really, and with Jeff as well too, I couldn't really argue against what they were saying, because I had taken enough philosophy classes at this point in time to understand that the best way to argue somebody's disposition or to make a point is to really understand where they're coming from, to know what it is that they're thinking, so you can think around it or try to prove it wrong. And so it dawned on me that I had never read anything by a real kind of Christian author outside of some stuff from Kierkegaard. So I decided that I needed to do that in order to prove that I was right in my kind of what had become at that time kind of your typical New Agey set of beliefs. I had borrowed a little bit from the Eastern philosophy that I had learned, and a little bit from various other places, and just really kind of made it my own. It was a very comforting place to be. Kind of one of the tenets of more new agey kind of expressions of things is that there's this concept of that there's no such thing as sin, right? There is no right and wrong. That's a very comfortable place to be. I could easily forgive myself for the things that I had done because there really was no wrong in them. And so I wanted to be able to argue these points and argue that God would not use an organized, kind of system to impart His love, to people. So I started reading some Christian literature, and again, even though I had kind of Protestant arguments coming from Jeff and Catholic arguments coming from my brother, I didn't read anything Catholic. I was ready now to study Christianity and give it a shot, try to understand it, but I certainly was not going to go to Catholicism because, again, I knew, right? I knew this is not, where I need to go, and frankly, I'm angry at it. I'm really just...
Was there enough... because of time, I don't want to open up too many. Mm-hmm. But were you still equating Catholicism with your father?
Absolutely. I was equating not just with my father, but even with my mother. I love my mother dearly, but there was a sense, and when I get into the Catholicism piece, I'll explain about how I kind of grew to have this kind of non-existent relationship with our Blessed Mother, that kind of stemmed from the way that I grew up and my mom's influence on me.
So you're avoiding Catholic stuff, you're reading evangelical stuff?
Yeah, I was reading, I started with kind of, I think where a lot of people start, which is C.S. Lewis. So I read, some Mere Christianity, The Problem of Pain, The Great Divorce, great books. And then I read some evangelical stuff as well too. I read some Billy Graham and a guy named J.P. Moreland. And a funny thing started to happen as I was reading this literature. Some of this stuff really started to really find its way inside, not just my soul, but inside my mind. And that voice that had always been throughout my entire life was saying, this is good, this is good. And it's as if I could almost feel myself start to believe it, or at least the desire to believe it. I wanted to believe this. And then I went through this period in my life with this huge, what's called cognitive dissonance. So one part of my mind was saying, I want to believe this. There's something in this that is attractive to me. I think I could find truth here. And then the other side of my mind saying, you're being brainwashed. Don't allow this to happen. Stand up for what you believe in. Like, this is what happens to people. Don't do this. All the while as well, outside of the hanging out with John and Jeff and their community from time to time, I was still heavily involved with my friends who were drug abusers and political activists. And so as I started bringing up questions, because I would kind of take what I was learning from Christianity and pose it as questions, something I do as a therapist. I love posing questions. I noticed how uncomfortable people were starting to become around me. And it's like you could almost sense that they knew something was about to happen to me. And they were afraid of it, or they didn't want it to happen. This sense of, we're going to lose our friend. And of course, I thought that if I actually went through with this, if I actually converted, if I gave myself to Christ, I would lose this entire social circle of friends. I would be brutally rejected. I would be looked down upon. It wouldn't have mattered what good I had done, with those people. It would be immediately thrown out the window. So not only was it a question of, finding truth, I mean, it meant a complete life overhaul. Something that is, I think, hard for any human being to contemplate. You know, we all want people to like us. You know, we all want people to love us, to desire to know us. I remember I had relatively decided that I was going to go through with it, that I was going to give myself to Christ, but I wasn't quite sure. I went to Jeff, and I said, Jeff, there's this new movie out. You know, everyone's heard it. We had been discussing it in school and stuff like that, The Passion of the Christ. And I was like, I'd like to go see it. Would you mind taking me to go see it? He said, yeah, sure. And so we went and saw it, just me and him. I cried through a lot of it. We went out for a beer afterwards, and I just kind of asked him some questions. And I don't think Jeff knows that this was the day that it happened, but I went home that night, and I did a very typical born-again kind of thing. I went into my room, and I lit some candles, and I got down on my knees, and I asked Jesus to come into my life. You know, I said, you know, Father, I'm sorry for being away for such a long time, but I truly want to know you, and I want you to come lead and guide me, and, you know, and I'm just sorry. I'm sorry for being so angry and being so jaded. But I want to heal, and I want you to forgive me, and I want to forgive myself. And that next morning again, I woke up and started going to church with Jeff and his group, and I enjoyed it. You know, it was nice to be around people that were, I don't know, just a little bit more healthy, and it felt good to have made this decision that I had made, and I did lose the vast majority of my friends, although there are people from those days who are still very much a part of my life, who have never left my side. They may not be practicing Christians themselves, but they are good people, and they accept me for who I am.
They might within themselves be yearning and drawing and
absolutely
in their own pace.
Absolutely. Pretty quickly, from going to church with Jeff's community, I started to find myself again yearning for something more. That voice didn't go away, much to my surprise. It kept on saying, keep looking, keep seeking. I was kind of taken back by that. I was like, what? Okay, I'll do that. And at the same time that happened, a desire came up that was pretty foreign to me. And I realized that the desire, what I know now, the desire was for liturgy, was for a sense of reverence, a sense of deep spirituality. So there was a sense when I spent time with the Buddhist monks, there was a heavy spirituality to it. You know, there was something sacred that you were doing, mystical, will have you. And then when I joined the non-denominational community, there really was not a whole sense of that. You know, it was kind of typically non-denominational, which is, you know, you walk in, there's worship music for like a half hour, preaching for an hour, and then more worship music. So not a lot of quiet, not a lot of peace. And so I desired
very
that.
Intellectual, really.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
Mm-hmm. I decided that I would look into the Episcopal Church because I wanted to go back to some kind of formal reverence. I wanted to be able to walk into a building and sit quietly and pray, and you know, I missed. That sounds maybe bad, but I missed the bells and whistles. You know, I really did. And so I went to the Episcopal Church, and I was like, "This is it! Finally, I'm home. Here I am. This is wonderful." And at this time, I was just very much on fire for Christ, to the point where I was in my senior year of college. I was now defending Christian positions in psychology classes, much to the dismay of a lot of my professors, who also were kind of shocked by my conversion as well. And I ended up getting confirmed in the Episcopal Church, and immediately knew that I wanted to discern the priesthood. And so I started to do that, and they discern the priesthood in a very different way as they do in the Catholic Church. So it's more parish-based. So like your parish kind of puts you up, to go to divinity school. During this time, the Episcopal Church was kind of going through its hardships with the ordination of Gene Robinson. I decided that, and what's funny is that it actually came from my Episcopal priest, Father Jack, who said, "Ken, there's a lot of strange things going on in our church right now. I would just recommend that you look into your roots, your Catholic roots." And I was taken back. I was like, "Excuse me?" He's like, "Well, you seem very Catholic. You come in here for confession." He's like, "That isn't not allowed in our faith, but it's something kind of out of the ordinary. And I see you praying rosaries, and again, it's not allowed. It's just kind of out of the ordinary." So I was really taken back by the fact that he wanted me to look into the Catholic religion, but I did. I had this instance where I had decided that I was seriously going to consider it. One morning I was driving to get a cup of tea, and I drove by St. Peter's Church, and that voice inside of me just said so clearly, "Yes." And I said, "No." But I gave it some serious thought. I went home and I kind of did a cost-benefit analysis of being Catholic, not being Catholic, including like I still wanted to be a priest. So I went, did that, I prayed about it. I graduated college, and I went for about a month and a half trip through Europe by myself. Did the whole backpacking thing as a present to myself. And it was during this experience, I was at Mass in Assisi, and
powerful place.
Very much so. The moment that I had been going to Mass for a little bit, I wasn't taking the Eucharist at the time, and the moment that the priest there held up the Eucharist, again, just one of these private revelation moments, it struck me that I felt like I had this gift, this unique ability, which helps me in my counseling practice a lot, to be able to see God in all people, in all kind of different situations. And that gift really became known to me at that moment. But there was the added, like, Ken, you can see parts of God in all of these things. This is God. This is the entirety of Him, and it's here for you to take. And that was the real moment that I knew. I was like, that's it. If this is true, which I think it is, I've come home. There's no other place to go. I had a very intense moment that night. I immediately, after realizing this, felt this huge sense of unworthiness, of knowing my middle name is Francis. So that's the one saint that growing up I heard a lot about, was about St. Francis and his gentleness, his kindness, his love for God. And so I knew that St. Francis was a real Christian. Kierkegaard struggled with, defining himself as a Christian because he had wondered if he had actually ever met one in his lifetime. And here's St. Francis, and I'm like, who am I to even consider myself a Christian or a Catholic or whatever it is I am right now? Because I am not this. I am not this. I went to dinner by myself that night. I had called my mom beforehand, and I was telling her about my unworthiness. I was like, Mom, I just feel so unworthy. And this is horrible. And she's like, Ken, you're not unworthy. She's like, I could imagine that's a lot of people feel that in Assisi, and you're on your own journey. Just remember that. And if you really want to, Ken, you could be like St. Francis if you want to. Just remember that. Went to dinner that night, and I just started bawling as I was having dinner. And the waitress comes up to me, and in English, she kind of puts her hand on my back and she rubs a little bit. She's like, are you okay? And I said, I'm fine. It's just this place. I don't know what it's doing to me. And she just kind of chuckles and she says, it happens all the time. All the time it happens. And she gave me a free tiramisu dessert. And I came home, and I started going to Mass regularly. I still wanted to be a priest. So I looked into becoming a Catholic priest. I walked into the pastor of the church I had moved to Fort Collins as soon as I had gotten back from Europe. And talked to my parish priest at the time and said, I would like to become a Catholic priest. How does that happen? And he said something kind of strange, like, well, do you have school debt? And I said, yes. And he was like, well, you probably need to get rid of that first before you seriously consider. And that was not the correct response, right? That's not what I was looking for. So I didn't take a no for an answer. I don't remember how it happened, but I was able to get the email address of the Archbishop of Denver at the time, who was Archbishop Charles Chaput.
Yeah.
And I emailed him my story and that I thought I might like to become a priest. He invited me down to Denver to have lunch with him. And so I met with him, and we ended up meeting 4 or 5 times, and with him eventually saying, Ken, you should apply. Why don't you just put in your application and come here? And not saying that means that you should be a priest or anything like that, but you should just come figure this out. And so I did. I entered seminary in 2006. And it was, Marcus, easily, still to this day, outside of the marriage to my wife, the most amazing time of my entire life. And it's really ironic that I was in seminary for what tantamounts to be just around 9 months, because I really feel like that my time in seminary, the formation that I received there, if God had a womb, I felt like God really placed me in his room. I was a very, very neophyte, to Catholicism at that time, so much that I wasn't even confirmed. So before I had to go into seminary, I had to be confirmed, which the Archbishop did for me. And I was there for 9 months. It's like as if God nurtured me, cultivated me, and really gave me life. And then when I made the tough decision to leave seminary, it was like God gave birth to me and said, here you are, now you are a Catholic man. And now you can go back out into that world where you came from, the world that you came from, Ken. And you can really now, you can show people my love. And ultimately, that's what my life has been ever since then, is finding unique ways that are tailored to the gifts that God has given me to share His love, because He has been so loving to me.
Looks like, Kim, we're going to have you back. Hear more about your work. Thank you for sharing that. Again, as you and I mentioned during the break, your life just reminds me of that quote by Augustine, "Our hearts are restless until they rest in thee." I mean, that really is the kind of the message of your life, and it's good to have you home. Ken, thanks for sharing with us on the journey home,
pleasure.
and our Lord's
pleasure.
blessing on your continued work and your counseling work as you help others on their journey.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ken. Thank you for joining us this episode of The Journey Home. I hope Ken's journey is an encouragement to your journey. God bless. See you next week.